Power Project crew, what's going down? Today we have an awesome episode for you from the one and only Stan the Rhino Efferding, Mr. Vertical Diet himself. Stan was hanging out at the Arnold supporting some of his athletes such as Larry Wheels, who claimed another world record, and Hafthor Bjornsson, who claimed another Arnold Strongman title. So when Stan speaks, we listen because he has the track record to prove that he knows what the heck he's talking about when it comes to diet and nutrition. We, of course, got into the vertical diet and some of the new things that he's focusing on, such as libido and fertility for men, which is pretty cool to hear him speaking about that. We also got into his new revamped app that's going to help a lot of athletes stay on track, help them improve, and I selfishly asked him what the heck I can do with my diet. This episode is brought to you by Piedmontese Beef, the absolute best beef on the planet, and every time we listen to Stan, you just instantly want to start eating more steak. The absolute best way to do that is with certified Piedmontese beef. Head over to Piedmontese.com, that's Piedmontese.com. At checkout, enter promo code PowerProject for 25% off your order, and if your order is $99 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Check out the show notes and the YouTube description for links to Stan Efferding's social media. Hit him up maybe if you have some more questions that we didn't get to, or if you want to just give him a shout out and thank you for being on the show, please do so. And for now, please enjoy this conversation with the one and only Stan the Rhino Efferding.
Rhino, are you slowing down at all? You know,
I don't think so. It doesn't feel like it.
Well, you keep getting older, right?
I know. It's reflected in my squat.
When you're squatting,
that's how I measure my age.
I think I saw you squatting, what, 600 or 6
Something
plates?
Close to that. Yeah, it still feels good.
And you moved it around for a few reps the other day?
Yeah. I don't have a goal in mind. I'm just trying to do what I enjoy, and I enjoy doing it, and it doesn't hurt. Ever since I started using Mark Ripeto's form, you know, I can't squat as much as I used to using my...
What's the difference in form from what he has going on?
Well, when you and I got together...
Starting strength.
You kind of noticed that... we played around with a bunch of different foot stances, and obviously that wider foot stance worked for me because I had more glutes and stronger in the hips. Ripeto's, even though it incorporates a lot of glutes, it's still a lot of quad in that movement. But it's it just allows me to go pain free. I think that, in powerlifting you're working with leverages, and it's you're just trying to figure out how to move the weight, and I ended up kind of acquiring over time some aches and pains, my hips and knees.
Yeah, your hip was pretty bad for a little while. It was pretty bad. Like you thought you were done, actually.
Yeah, and you could tell from the form that I use that I'm putting a lot of load on those hips, and it served its purpose. But it's not, long term. It wasn't going to do me well for longevity. So, I'm fortunate that I just was patient. I kind of with the hip injury and the knees, I kind of started getting frustrated. I didn't want to go in and squat at all, and it's something that I've enjoyed doing for over 30 years. I've got a torn rotator cuff, so I can't bench very heavy anymore without paying the price. And that was always one of the things I really enjoyed too. Right. So. Last year I went to a Ripeto seminar after watching a bunch of his videos and playing around with it, and ever since then I've been doing that technique, and I have no pain, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Mark Ripeto has a genius way of teaching a squat, and I think that it's misunderstood. I think a lot of people think that he only knows one way to squat. But like what I got out of it, because I've never been to a seminar of his, but what I got from some videos of his is that he's teaching you like the easiest way to squat. And it's a way that anyone can learn how to squat, because I think ideally you might want to be more upright in a squat. You might want to have the bar a little higher. You might want to be able, but most people, as you go around and try to help people. It's very difficult for people to be able to break parallel with like this picture perfect form and being very upright. And so I think his way of teaching the squat, where you're kind of using your back and you're using your hips and you're kind of using a combination of things, I think is smart.
Yeah. Well, and you and I played around with my squat stance based just primarily on strength. Yep. And we went with the wider stance, and you notice I had my toes turned really far out. And I think that has more to do with people's, the way
structure,
their own structure, the way that their hip socket is in their hips, and everybody's different that way. So what Mark's doing is just trying to mechanically set that up, and so that you're staying over your center of gravity, you're incorporating more muscle into the movement, and just had less pain. So that's why I did it. When I teach it, I always I think the squat's the best exercise by far. And although I've said, what's the best exercise, the one you'll do, I'd like to encourage them to enjoy the squat, so they'll do it. Because I want people to do that.
It's like the metabolic rate of it, like the metabolic cost of it and everything, right?
Everything. Yeah, the return on investment is great because you're incorporating so much muscle. Plus, it's a loading exercise, axial loading. So now, especially for women, you get that bone mineral density. Just eating calcium doesn't solve that problem for you. And so my goal is particularly because I see a lot of people, like when I did that video with Juji Mufu on his squat. I was just watching when he squatted and he was breaking at the knees and he was having a lot of instability between the knees and the bar. Almost immediately you could see the wave of the body. And we know that as the weight gets heavier, one of the hardest things is controlling the core. And it's because he was loading primarily the quads, the lower quads. By breaking at the knees first, he wasn't involving enough glutes and being stable enough in the hips and the core. And so I suggested he adjust his form primarily, because he was looking for a big total, a big high squat. And he was using knee wraps already, and kind of the limiting factor was his knees, which ultimately was a problem for me with my knee tendonitis. So they asked me, is this the best way to squat? And I said, no, squatting is the best exercise, is what I feel. And so finding a form that works for you, even when I work with, average folks or dad bods and soccer moms who aren't ever intending to perform a max squat, I just try and find something that's comfortable for them. That's the first thing I'll do. Just sit down in a chair, stand up. How does that feel? And then, ultimately try and make it easy and enjoyable so that they'll come back to the gym and try it again. And just by matter of doing it consistently, obviously you get that neural adaptation initially and you see a significant increase in performance over the first 30 days, then you're hooked. Once you start seeing that you go from, a 25-pound plate to a 35-pound plate to a 45-pound plate just within the first 30 days, and you go from, 3 or 4 reps to being able to bang out 6 pretty easily, that gets you hooked. Now, we know the long-term adaptations take much longer to get the strength and hypertrophy, but at least it's comfortable. It's not painful. Anybody who's ever been asked to, get into a squat the way that your high school PE teacher taught you, look up, keep a vertical torso, bend at the knees, and then trying to find depth. And when your hips are tucking underneath,
it doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't feel good. It's awkward, especially when you're down in the bottom of the movement, and that's your weakest position because your knees are so far out over your toes, and you hardly have any glutes activated into the movement, and that's a really weak position to be in. So people start, I don't want to load this anymore if that's what's ultimately going to be the case. But when you switch the form up and you get a little low bar and you shorten that moment arm and you load the glutes a little more, all of a sudden the bottom of the movement becomes the most powerful position.
Absolutely.
Almost like when somebody, you have a kid, or you're...
Yeah, you feel really good in that spot.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And if somebody were going to jump on your back to do a piggyback ride, you wouldn't have a vertical torso. Right. It was interesting. Recently I was working with a football player, Eddie Lacy. He was I think he had a 1,200-yard season, a rookie for Green Bay Packers. And I went down there, and he was doing the high school PE teacher squat, and he didn't like squatting. And so I walked him through that technique, and within just a matter of 3 weeks, he was knocking out 400 pounds for reps, loading it in more of a, kind of a ribs down, contracting his abs. And one of the ways that I related that to him is I said, when you've got the ball and you're running up the middle, and you see somebody on the other side of the line coming at you with their hat down, do you chest up, look at the ceiling? Is that what you do? No, you crunch yourself down. You completely contract your abs and get that rib cage down and try and get your shoulders about as close to your hips as you can. Coils up, yeah. So he understood that immediately when I told him, what do you do? So for most people, you say, if I'm going to punch you in the stomach, what do you do? How do you react? And immediately you crunch down. And that's, stabilizing the core. It's just another method, I think, a cueing mechanism. Chris Duffins talked about this for years, about bracing. And we talked about this circumferential breathing. And there's a whole host of different techniques you can perform in order to get people to get that mind-muscle connection. What should you be feeling when you do the movement? Mark talks about a lot about the kinesiology of the movement. I do things based on feel. What muscles should be contracting, and how do I get them to contract that muscle? So I go through a host of little learning cues. I have them sit down in a chair and then pick both their knees up and your lower abs will contract. You can imagine, you can do it right here while we're sitting here, and you start to pull your knees up. Yep. And what happens right down here in your lower abdominals, that's what you should be feeling when you go down to squat, not your quads necessarily. My connection with my mind isn't with my quads. My connection's with my lower abs, with my core. So anyhow, I mean to belabor the point, but I just love squatting so much that I was, happy to learn it and happy to teach it now to other people. And I use whatever methods necessary. I've gotten, Juji's video had like 1 million views and had thousands of comments. Super popular. And I got hundreds of DMs from people, most of them dick pics, but the rest of them were just comments about how their form improved and how much more they like squatting and how their PRs went up. And they were sending videos, asking me if they were doing it right. But they just enjoyed squatting. They felt more powerful, more confident. And that to me is pretty important. So I don't really talk about what's best overall. I don't make that comparison, but I'm trying to find out what works best for you, the same way you did for me when I came to you from training with Flex. I was kind of struggling with 405 at the time. Obviously I'd just come off a bodybuilding show. Right. But the weight just didn't feel strong. And we started playing around with the boxes and the bands and trying to get me to position so that, I could figure out where was I most stable and what muscles could I activate that would give me the best strength. And that's how we ended up with that form.
Yeah. Pain is a huge limiting factor for a lot of people. And it's a barrier of entry that ends up, a lot of people's fitness falls off and stuff like that because of it. Are you in pain now? Like after you do, you do 600 pounds for 3 reps or something, do you have any, the next day or 2 days, do you have any pain, soreness, stiffness?
No, that's the beautiful thing about it. I don't. It's the good hurt. It's just the muscles.
Yeah.
You bend your leg and you feel the muscle.
The legs are a little tight.
You're right, but not the joints. And part of that is, I'm really, really consistent, disciplined about my nutrition, my sleep, my 10-minute walks and all that stuff. So I promise you I won't bore anybody today with 10-minute walks, steaks, CPAPs, or salt. I don't need to repeat what you've already heard, but I'm extremely disciplined about that. So that's the best thing about it, is that I can't wait for 72 hours to expire so I can go squat again. I hate even training upper body. It's just so boring to me and it's unrewarding. I'll do some dip chin up supersets and I just can't wait for the next squat day. So I don't have any pain that you would consider to be, debilitating or degenerative. I just have muscle soreness, which is great.
We just went down memory lane, getting Mark's story about how he came to Westside and all that good stuff. What was it about him that made you seek his coaching?
He just reached out to me. I had never had a powerlifting coach. I was a bodybuilder that lifted heavy weights. I thought it would make me big. And I learned that wasn't the case when training with Flex Wheeler, that there was a different way. It was probably the first time I ever really learned about hypertrophy apart from just loading. And Mark had emailed me because I did a powerlifting meet in Sacramento, probably about a year prior or a little less. And so I figured I'd just give him a shot. I was already in San Jose. And so I just I'd packed my bags and lived in San Jose for 3 months in a hotel training with Flex. So I just drove over and trained with Mark. And I told Mark, I said, I want you to do every set and rep with me and coach me. And I didn't want to just come train at his gym. And that was the first time I had any exposure to a coach. And it's valuable. I think everybody should have a coach. I talk about that a lot. Even if your coach should have a coach. Nowadays we've got so much great information out there that I think it's worthwhile to reach out to someone because, from the very first set that I did, he had a video camera going. It's the first time anybody ever videotaped me lifting, in such a manner that it was intended to improve my lifting other than just to show off, or to watch myself later. And we started critiquing the technique and the form and all that stuff. And, I'd never been affiliated with a lifting gym like a West Side like you had. And so I never really analyzed the lifts. I just, lifted the heaviest shit I possibly could in whatever ugly form that I needed to.
Yeah. We filmed every workout.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can remember even after my first meet, the comments were about my form. And even all those years later when I met Mikhail Koklev, and he told me, he said, Stan, he said, I watch your lifts many times, and every time I watch them, I want to fix your fucking form.
I know people really criticize you a lot about your form, but I think you had great form. In the squat, you had an unconventional style of lifting. You don't have really big, thick legs, but you were taking advantage of a really strong, thick upper body and strong torso. You stayed very upright. You were super controlled. Like you would go down, it would take like 5-6 seconds sometimes, but you'd come back up. It'd be like, a second or less that you'd come back up. Your bench form was good, and I think your deadlifts they worked for you. You had to get a little bit wider stance, but now look at Eddie Hall and Brian Shaw. A lot of these guys are pulling over 1,000 pounds with this wider stance. I think they probably stole it from you.
I think that's actually a big thing. Dave Tate's function form style. Like, a lot of lifters think that there's one way for them to squat, deadlift, or bench, or sumo deadlift, or whatever. But you're someone who are like even now, where you're picking up a ripetose form, you're continuing to change up, and it's a different form than what you used to squat. What was your PR squat?
Yeah, 854 with no knee wraps.
It's a different. Like, you're squatting right now with a different form again, right?
Yeah.
Again, what feels right? It's like you got to remember, like it's just to understand that there's a constant evolution to a way you can lift even after you become elite of elite. That's a wild thing.
Yeah, just the willingness, I think. I've always thought there was something to be learned. I've worked with a lot of different people over the years. I've learned a lot from each of them. And it doesn't mean that I agree with everything that they say. Or, some people, they get, I think they're afraid to ask questions, or they feel like they know it all, or, just to affiliate themselves with someone that might take credit for their work or something. That seems to be what everybody's concerned about now. I like the people who ask a lot of questions. I've always asked a lot of questions. Mark's been that way as well. He knows an extraordinary amount, but he's never stops seeking more information. Just last year I attended, I don't know if we talked about it before, but I attended barbell medicine seminar as well as Mark Ripeto's seminar.
And you're in school right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm taking classes. I read the NSCA's textbook last year and took my CSCS and passed that. And I studied exercise science in college. I have a science degree, but there's still stuff to learn, and it's changed over the decades as well. And then even things that I've thought I believed or knew just a few years ago, certainly a decade ago, I've since made some adjustments to those, if not completely entirely as to the belief, but certainly to the weight of how important it is. And because I try and prioritize things in terms of what works and what's really important, what moves the needle and what is probably not as crucial.
How do you manage somebody that's so big? You're working with Hafthor Bjornsson. I think this is his third Arnold in a row that he's won?
Yeah, 18, 19, and 20. We started together in late 2017.
He's starting to really dominate. But how do you help manage his health? Because I know with the vertical diet and your 10-minute walks, and you guys read his blood work, and you guys go over stuff very thoroughly. How are you able to manage, all that? Like it seems like it would be unhealthy to be that big. Yeah.
I have that Rhino's rant I did called, if you want to be healthy, don't compete. And so I understand that there's some sacrifices that you make. And I mentioned, we've probably heard before that if you ask an Olympic athlete, if there was a drug they could take to win a gold medal, but they'd die 5 years later, would they still take it? And most of them probably would. So we understand there's sacrifices we make. But what I found is that even though they're two different things, fitness and health, and they don't always complement each other, I just found that when I got an athlete healthier, that they performed better. And that doesn't mean that what they're doing is healthy. Being 450 pounds isn't healthy by any stretch of the imagination, nor is being an MMA fighter or even an offensive lineman in football. Or a 12-year-old gymnast, for that matter, with all the surgeries on their ankles and tendons and wrists.
Maybe even just being 6'9" is not that healthy.
No, and we know that. We know that taller, heavier people have a shorter lifespan, I think. And,
not much you can do about his height, right?
Not much you could do about that. Obviously, weight is of a concern. So with these, and younger people tend to be able to be more resilient. And as you age, you certainly don't want to carry that weight too far into the later years. That's one of my biggest concerns with powerlifters who aren't willing to kind of let that go and carry just too much mass and body fat in particular into their 40s and certainly their 50s. That's when I start to get concerned for people in heart disease and the like. But the younger athletes who are trying to push it, what I try and do first and foremost is I get blood tests, obviously, and I try and make sure that their blood sugars and blood pressure and, the huge things are under control. The blood thickness of the blood, we look at the hemoglobin, hematocrit. Interestingly, when you look at a blood test for those people who have had it done, if you get a pretty comprehensive test, things are kind of in order by what's most important to what's least important. And you start with, the thickness of your blood, your hemoglobin, hematocrit, and red blood cells.
Can you share with people how they should? It seems like it's kind of a pain in the ass to get your blood work done. Do you have an easy way? You got a shortcut?
The private MD labs, you can do it online. I've got a link on my website in my shop that you can go to where you can get a 15% discount. I just contacted the folks that I've been using for 10 years and asked them if I get a discount. What
website is that?
StanEfferding.com. And in my shop there's a blood test link, but anybody can go online. There's a host of other companies, but this one's been around a long time, really easy to use and pretty reasonably priced. It's not free to get a blood test. I mean, a good comprehensive blood panel is going to be about $300, $350, and it would be the same if you went to a medical doctor. These guys allow you to do it online. You just go into privatemdlabs.com and you select a particular test. There's a host of them in there. I get like an athletic... a male athletic profile that kind of gives you a really comprehensive plan. And they email you a requisition form, and you print it out and take it down to any LabCorp near you. There's generally one within a couple of miles of everybody. And then you get your blood drawn, and 3 days later, or so, 3 or 4 business days later, they send you the results. Now, interpreting those, they have a list of your results compared to the range and whether or not you're high or low. So you have an immediate indicator as to what might be high or low. Whether or not you understand what that means is a completely different thing. So you might have to seek help for that. Obviously, I help my athletes and clients, and
you consult a lot of people, right?
Yeah, and I've worked with I've been at this for over 30 years. I've had blood tests done, probably over 150 blood tests done since as early as 1990, and certainly almost monthly for the last 10 or 12 years throughout my the latter part of my competitive career. And so I'm really familiar with what all those mean, and I've studied it very well, and I've worked with a lot of doctors personally, whether it's specialists for particular conditions or it's HRT doctors in general. And that's what I like to start with. I think everybody who's competing, and certainly anybody who's using performance-enhancing drugs, or anybody who gets into their 40s and 50s and starts to have some symptoms. Lethargy or body composition change or depression, those kinds of things, it might be indicative of some sort of deficiency. And so I definitely recommend that. And I'm big on starting there because it allows me to, I think it gives the individual some awareness as to what they need to pay attention to. A lot of us tend to fly blind, or we just put our head in the sand and see, I've got this particular goal ahead of me and everything else be damned. But I'm of the mind that I'd like to know, because maybe I can help you reach that goal if we address a few things that you're not aware of or that you're just hiding from. And so that's the most important thing for me in terms of health with Hofthor, was to start with the blood test. And we did identify some things that needed to be addressed, obviously. Secondly, and I've talked about this more recently, I've been more and more adamant about people periodizing their weight. And when Hofthor came, he was 435. We brought him down to 395. Well, I think that's really important, just like you do with your strength training. You can't lift heavy all year round. Now I want to make sure that athletes periodize their weight, and so that when they're not lifting heavy, they come down, they drop enough body weight to improve all those blood markers.
Yeah, look at someone like Sadrunas Savickas. Like he's walking around the show. He looks. I mean, I don't know. I'm not aware of like his health or whatever, but he looks great. Yeah. And he's someone that after every competition that you wouldn't recognize him. He would lose like 50, 60 pounds easily after every show he ever did. And he won the Arnold Classic 8 times in a row.
Yeah, Hofthor lost 50 pounds over the winter. If you saw him, he was about down to 380. And him and Kelsey were trying to get pregnant, and they are. Congratulations to them.
Oh, that's great.
But the previous year, he did the same thing. He dropped down. The first year I worked with him, that was the first thing I asked him to do. That's a hard sell. You get an athlete that comes to you and they want your help with their health or their nutrition or their performance.
It's like you got to do the opposite of what you love doing for a little bit.
Yeah, you're going to have to drop 10% of your body weight. And they look at you like you're crazy. And I would have too, because I lived it my whole life trying to get. But fortunately, just by virtue of the fact that I competed in both bodybuilding and powerlifting, I was dieting after every powerlifting meet. And not because, I thought it was ideal, for performance or for health. I just did it because that was my sport of choice. And then come to find out all these many years later that just by chance, I was doing something that was very effective for both health and performance long-term in powerlifting. So I recommend it for all of them. I just bumped into Julius Maddox yesterday, and I've been talking to him over the last many months.
Big boy, 770 bench.
770 bench. That was amazing. But the first conversation we had was, when was your last blood test? Are you wearing a CPAP? Let's get together and talk about, your 800 bench. And so we're going to get together here next week and start trying to work through some of the same things with him. But there's another example of an athlete I don't want to take a lot of weight off of long term. If his goal is to get 800 pounds, if we do come down, we have to go back up. And so I'm really cautious. I think one of the things that's I don't want to say tragic, but it's just that's gone wrong in the fitness and health. The fitness and health is two different things. What I've seen is that a lot of the bodybuilder, figure, physique, bikini people employ these diets to get stage ready. The egg whites, whitefish, tilapia and broccoli diets. And then the general population, the vast majority of people out there, think that is a successful way for them to lose weight. And we've talked before about all the downfalls of that, the anemia and the amenorrhea and all the thyroid slowing down and all the muscle tissue loss and all of that, because the general population is not using thyroid medication. They're not using Anavar, and they're not using clenbuterol.
In addition to how hard it is maybe on your body and your hormones, it's just difficult to execute, period. The regimen with the supplements, the regimen with the drugs, the regimen with the cardio and the lifting and everything else gets to be too much. And then once you discontinue that, if you go back to kind of like regular eating or not counting your calories, you could end up gaining a lot of weight back.
Well, it almost always happens, and because the more muscle tissue you lose, it's been shown that when you gain weight again, the more fat you will gain because you've burned off a lot of the metabolically active tissue in your body, which is the muscle. So it's tragic that these people go through these yo-yo dieting and they see that bikini girl on stage in quote unquote the best shape of her life, and all they see is the outside. They don't see what's going on the inside. They don't see the rebound the week after, the 2 weeks after, the month after the show. Fortunately, now with the internet, we've have a lot of folks coming out and saying that's not the best way, but it's not mainstream. So I mentioned that the health and fitness industry has gotten bad messages from each other, and so mainstream has gotten that bad dieting information. I want to get in the best shape of my life, so I'm going to eat egg whites and whitefish. And then they end up with all of those health problems. Well, athletes, by the same token, have started to take advice from health practitioners and longevity people. And the longevity people are out there, talking about fasting, and they're talking about the same kind of thing, getting rid of red meat, getting rid of dairy, getting rid of salt, and all those things. And now you got athletes' performance is being impaired as a result of the health industry trying to advise them on performance. It's two different things. When you read through, Jose Antonio's work at the International Society of Sports Nutrition, you see a very different protocol for performance. He was the one that's been driving the higher protein intakes, whereas, protein is something the longevity people try and get you to decrease. They don't want the mTOR pathway to be stimulated, and they think that's precipitous to greater cancer rates and everything else with IGF-1. They talk about those things negatively. I talk about those things positively. Longevity community talks about insulin negatively. I talk about those things in the sporting communities positively, because those are the things that cause people to grow and perform and to increase muscle mass and performance. And so I know it's two different groups of people. When somebody asks me a question about carbs or fasting or any of those kinds of things, I got to be really cautious. Say, well, who are we talking about? Who's the client? Is the client a dad bod or a soccer mom with a elevated blood sugars, or is the client a top level professional athlete? Because it's two completely different answers. And so that's what concerns me now is that we've blurred the line, or we're borrowing from the wrong pot of information for the different goals.
But it's also really cool how you're applying these things contextually. So you mentioned with Hathor, he's not always in the mode of eating excessive amounts of food to gain weight or staying at that weight outside of competition. Right. You're like, you're focused on his performance, but you're utilizing all of these things from the longevity side of things to help him to be able to not just perform well, but I feel like, and I'd assume that you're also helping him think about the future and think about like, you know, what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, when he wants to get out. Like Mark got out, he's super healthy. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm assuming you're helping him think about all those things too.
Yeah. Well, I think that controlling blood sugars, blood pressure, blood thickness, as we just talked about, liver and kidney enzymes, all of those things are part of him performing better. I just do it in a little different way than over restricting or demonizing certain foods that I think are beneficial for performance, and I periodize it, as mentioned. And so I think that's what we're going to work on with Julius Maddox. I think that we'll intervene here. We'll get a blood test. We'll find out what we can improve in terms of health, and that may take a short period of time at which we'll bring his weight down. And it's not huge. If you're a 300-pound person and you've got insulin resistance problems, you lose about 7% of your body weight, maybe 20 pounds. So you're only going to 280, right? That is going to be enough to give you an improvement in all of your blood markers. Your blood sugar will definitely improve, your insulin sensitivity. That could be enough. And that's important because now we've got this, what's the acronym now? Is healthy at all sizes or whatever it is now that we're talking about. And everybody's kind of disagreeing on what it means. But what it means is it's not a matter whether you have a six-pack or somebody perceives you to be, you know, fit. It's whether or not you're healthy. And I look at that in terms of internal health. And so fit at every size or whatever the acronym is, I can't follow all these little pass. I'm leaning over here to see if anybody else has heard about this.
No, it's healthy at every size.
Healthy at every size, something like that. People should know that we're not asking someone to lose 100 pounds. We're not asking them to have a six-pack. We're asking them that we're recognizing that when they lose 7% and maybe at most 10%, if a 300-pound person only has to lose 30 pounds to have a significant improvement in blood sugars, blood pressure, in cholesterol, and that could be, you know, they'll improve fatty liver, some of that visceral fat around the organs, which is the kind of fat that causes the problems. That individual at 270 might not look fit to the fitness community, but that can be a very healthy individual. And then the behaviors are more important than, you know, just improving their sleep and doing some sort of cardiovascular exercise. Obviously, I'm trying to implement the 10-minute walks. If they would just consistently do a few of those behaviors, then, you know, they're not going to get anywhere near 12% body fat to be healthy. Nowhere close, but they could definitely feel better and probably improve their hormones and their blood sugars at the same time. So don't think that I'm trying to intervene with one of these, you know, big, heavy athletes, because I don't want to scare them away. And, you know, I want them to implement these very sensible lifestyle fixes to improve their health so they can improve their performance, because that's ultimately my goal with them.
What does the science show in terms of like body fat? Like, is there any science about, you know, people dying earlier because of X body fat percentage? Is there any information about like people that are 50 pounds overweight? Because it seems like, even from what you're saying and just from my own observation, that you can be like pretty fat. You can be kind of fat as long as you're not continuously bombarding your metabolism with too much food. Yeah. Day in and day out your entire life. It seems like you know, as long as you kind of at some point decide, I'm going to find a path to eat less food and move a little bit, that you can still be relatively healthy and live a long life, but maybe kind of have some, you know, decent amount of body fat on you.
Probably the quickest way to check is going to be your BMI. If you get your BMI north of 30 and you have greater than a 40-inch waist for a male, 37, I think, for 36 for a woman, that's probably indicative of an increased exposure to some sort of all-cause mortality, whether it be cardiovascular disease or the like, or diabetes. So that would be kind of where I would start. Once that waist measurement, and the reason I'm specific about waist measurement is not only because the research suggests it, but and it's easy for you to measure, but because that's the fat, that's the visceral fat I was talking about. That's the liver fat that can cause the insulin resistance. And that's kind of the canary in the coal mine. That's actually the term that's used for erectile dysfunction. The canary in the coal mine is what they constantly talk about. If you have ED, then it's telling you probably have high insulin levels, high triglycerides, high blood sugar, and that's
your overall health might not be great.
That raises blood pressure, that causes endothelial lining damage, and now you're exposed to your increased triglycerides and cholesterol will then start accumulating in your blood vessels, and so all of that kind of starts from that fatty liver, starts from high insulin. Is if you want to focus on the root of the problem. Dr. Ben Mickman's talks a lot about this as being, if you want to, as does Ivor Cummins and the folks that are doing a lot of the cholesterol research, Dave Feldman. They're doing a lot of good stuff. And then on the other side, in the medical community as well, you look at Dr. Nadolsky with RP Strength. They're definitely focused on just reducing that visceral fat, the waist. Now, women tend to carry their fat in the hips and the butt, which is not a bad place. Can I get a hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
Not a bad place. But when one of the problems is, I just had a woman in my last seminar who had gone through menopause, and she says, my waist is getting bigger. Well, when you go through menopause and you have low estrogen, all of a sudden you start storing fat differently. And that's not a healthy fat. Once you start storing it around your organs in your waist, that's a problem. And so that would be a good time maybe to intervene, get some estrogen therapy, and to pay more careful attention to your body fat at that time, because it is in an unsafe place.
Do athletes need to be careful of carbohydrate consumption? Obviously, like Hapthor has a tremendous amount of muscle mass. Some of these athletes that you're helping, and they're tremendously active, but there is a lot of research, a lot of information that's showing that people are ending up with like diabetes, and people are ending up with insulin resistance, and people are ending up with dementia, and even like now they're kind of linking some metabolic diseases to cancer, or metabolic dysfunction rather to cancer. Do you think that it's carbohydrates, or is it just like the overconsumption of food, period, that's more leading to that?
Overconsumption. And some folks are even pointing to fat, because once the insulin seems to increase, because the carbohydrates can't be stored as fat because they're over fat. Their fat cells have been filled to the point that they're not storing it well, so the blood sugars stay elevated for a longer period of time because they don't have any place to put it. So I think it's a combination of the both. I know there's a lot of disagreement going on as to, it's the chicken or the egg. But it seems that the calories are and do continue to be the most important thing, just being too heavy. I think what happens with a lot of strength athletes in particular is that they just eat too many calories, assuming that's how they're going to grow muscle. You don't need to be at, a 2,000 calorie surplus to gain muscle. 500 is fine, 400 is fine, 300 might be fine. So
that's only for a period of time as well. I
think they get over fat, and that's kind of why I like to periodize. I do like to throw a lot of carbs at a big athlete, for training and to minimize delayed onset muscle soreness and to muscle tissue breakdown. But those are football players, like linemen, people with high workloads like CrossFitters. We have had some leaner athletes end up with some insulin resistance. But I think there's kind of a perfect storm going on there, that most of those leaner athletes that ended up with insulin resistance are usually ultra endurance type of athletes who have muscle wasting. And I've seen that in addition to sucking down a ton of carbohydrates, like a gallon or two of Kool-Aid a day and a loaf of white bread, which was commonplace amongst these guys, they were also pouring tons and tons and tons of vegetable or seed oils onto their salads to get extra calories from fats. And I think that's a terrible combination. I think more so, we see it in the studies in India, with the northern Indians in India eat more saturated fat, and the southern Indians eat more seed oil. And they have 7 times the rate of heart disease. So you've heard me often say that I think seed oils are bad, but it's partly for that reason. I think the saturated fats are more protective. I think the combination of the two. I don't think it's ever a good idea to push fats and carbohydrates together. When I throw carbs at an athlete, I'm bringing their fats down to about 0.3 grams per pound. And then if I bring their carbs down, I can bring their fats back up. But almost everyone has a much higher protein intake. I think the Atkins keto is very different than today's keto. Mm-hmm. Today's keto is much higher in protein. And we know that protein has a lot more benefits to it than say north of 70% fat. And I'm not too concerned about ketones per se. You can be low carb and not necessarily be in ketosis because your proteins are elevated. But the blood sugar, the gluconeogenesis that occurs from protein breakdown has a lower spike and a lower duration. So I think it's a better way to go. Either way, I think that people should be focusing on a significant amount of protein, and then be cautious if they're loading too much fat and protein together, or fat and carbs together. It's got to be one or the other.
In that information that you had about India, are you aware the people that are eating the seed oil, is it probably from processed foods?
I think they're adding it. I think it's just straight up seed oil. And we see that, it's been going on, for 100 years now. I mean, we were cutting lard with cottonseed oil back when we were feeding the Indians after like in the late 1800s. So we were sending it to Canada, and they finally rejected it. We were sending it to Okinawa after Pearl Harbor. We've been outsourcing this stuff, and even now I've mentioned, I own a meal prep company, and when we went to get eggs for our meal prep company, they send them to you in 5-gallon buckets, which is what most restaurants use, and you just ladle them up. Well, the eggs are adulterated. They're with 20% canola oil or some sort of oil. So it's like the food is all being cut with it because it's so cheap. And that's a problem. I think it's a problem. And I'm cautious to talk about inflammation because some of the more recent research shows that the omega-3s are more likely to cause inflammation and to oxidize than omega-6s. I'm just concerned about the dose with the carbohydrates. And I think that there is some evidence from the research that I suggested that the saturated fats can be protective. But I'm also not inclined to just think that you should be sucking down sticks of butter either. We went through that period, and I think that some of the research that Dr. Youssef put forth from the PEER study, he's a cardiologist from the World Health Federation, and it was one of the leads in the PEER study. They didn't like saturated fats north of, total fats north of 70%. They didn't see very positive outcomes. But when people got adequate protein, or when some of those saturated fats were from foods like cheese or milk, dairy, that decreased exposure to heart disease and improved body composition overall. We see that in France, and we see that in Switzerland, and we see the people, the Dutch in the Netherlands are the tallest people in the world as a population. And they didn't used to be that way before they started raising cattle and consuming so much cheese and milk. They actually had a pretty significant increase in their height overall. So I think it's really healthy. That's why I like to throw these whole foods in as we discuss. I think too many people, they get arguing over like processed foods. Well, in what amount and for what individual is what you start to ask yourself. If you've got an individual that's dieting, I know we talked a lot about if it fits your macros over the last many years. If you've got an individual that's on 1,500 calories a day, it's not a lot of room in there for them to do if it fits your macros and not be focused on micronutrients because they're not eating too many calories. So those calories have to be really nutrient dense. Every single thing they put in their mouth on a 1,500 calorie diet needs to have a lot of vitamins and minerals in it.
And if it doesn't, you can end up being really hungry, and you can end up kind of binging off the diet. Things like that could happen.
That's the big thing, is appetite control. And that's where, low carb sometimes helps. Intermittent fasting helps. And you look at ad libitum, when they studied to see how much people eat just ad libitum, just leave them alone rather than giving them exactly what to eat or fixing their calories. They tend to eat less with intermittent fasting. They tend to eat less when they sleep more too, which is huge.
Do you utilize any intermittent fasting yourself?
I do. Sometimes when I'm traveling a lot, I'll do two things.
That's way different for you, right? I mean,
I'll just skip breakfast.
Yeah,
really is what that is. But that's because then I'm less hungry.
But years ago, you were eating like 8 meals a day, right?
Yeah, to fuel workload.
Yeah.
And that was mainly just because I was training more. So now on days that I'm not training, I just don't see the sense in sucking down a whole.
And you don't eat as much carbs nowadays either, right?
And I'll time them around workouts. And mostly pre and post workout. And I'll throw in some simple carbs, like I eat dextrose on my rice before and after training on a big leg day. Helps me recover, gives me a little more energy and endurance for my workout, and I get less delayed onset muscle soreness. That and salt in there too. But on a day I'm off, there's really no sense. What do you need them for? And if you do eat them, you're hungrier. And so that what I'll do for folks that have blood sugar problems or appetite problems. I'm working with a lady now who's morbidly obese and has struggled with her weight for many, many, many years on and off diets. And I noticed, and again, another reason why I like blood tests, we got her blood tests back and her insulin was high. Her fasted glucose was normal. Her HA1C was normal. A lot of doctors don't run an insulin test. So now they're like, no, your blood sugars are normal. Well, insulin, for those of us who have played around with it in the bodybuilding and powerlifting world, makes you hungry as hell. You will be voraciously hungry. You could knock down a dozen donuts and your stomach can be in pain from how full you are, and you're still hungry. You're still stuffing food in your face because your insulin's high, you're hypoglycemic, your blood sugars are low. And so as soon as I saw that, I realized what her problem was. This is a person whose appetite was uncontrollable, and people want to get all squirrely about whether or not people that are overweight, should be blamed. Their condition's different than your condition. Their hunger can, in many cases, in this case in particular, can be so severe that it's uncontrollable. And I've been there, I've experienced it, so I'm sympathetic to it. So we did a couple of things. One, we went strictly carnivore right out of the gate. You just you do steak and eggs. You can eat almost as much steak as you want every day. An individual like that, you want them to eat to satiation.
You can eat as much steak and eggs as you want in that circumstance because you cannot. Not that you can't do it, but it's very difficult to overeat in that circumstance.
Very hard to overeat protein. We saw that in Jose Antonio's protein overfeeding studies. That those guys who tried to eat 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight had a very hard time consuming that much protein and couldn't gain weight, even when they ate 800 calories in excess of what they were previously eating. But if the other 2 groups that were being tested who had 800 extra calories in fats or carbs, they would gain weight. So protein's very helpful that way.
What were they eating? Any idea in that study? Because were they eating just straight protein, or was it like just lean meat or something, you think?
I don't know exactly. I think he did have some protein shakes in there just to get their protein up that high. But he was talking about it at the NSCA conference last year about the protein overfeeding studies and how hard it was. A couple of people dropped out. They just couldn't consume the 2 grams per pound. Yeah. It was all they did all day was consume protein. So back to this young lady. So not only did I start with that, I wanted her to eat to satiation. I think we saw that if you start putting people at calorie deficits, that they start to get hungry, and next thing you know, they're cheating on their diet. And I had to control that insulin problem. And so the way I did that is if you have a diabetic who has high blood sugar and then they have, their insulin and they end up hypoglycemic, right? Hyperinsulinemia, hypoglycemia, they get low blood sugar, then they take a dextrose tablet to prevent from having what do we call that?
Their blood sugar gets too low and they get dizzy and shit like that.
Okay, there we go. So in order to prevent that, they carry around dextrose tablets and they're, on their cells. Well, that's not 1,000 calories of lemonade, which is what I used to go race for whenever I tried insulin when I was powerlifting. And it's not a dozen donuts. It's a couple of dextrose tablets. So I armed her with Jolly Ranchers. And she had a pocket of Jolly Ranchers or some in her purse. And every time that she started to get hungry, because there's a huge difference between you're going to be a little hungry in a calorie deficit, but how hungry you are can be hugely impacted, obviously, by your hormones and the type of diet that you're on. So she would just pop a Jolly Rancher whenever she got a little bit hungry. And in between meals, I had her taking in some Nun tablets just because they're sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda, and it tends to suppress the acid in your stomach, which can be another driver of hunger, is to when you start to get hungry in between meals and your acid in your stomach starts to release, and you get that whole train of desire for food. And it worked incredibly well. Within 10 days, she'd lost like 14 pounds, but more importantly to me is that she said that her cravings had gone down and she wasn't hungry. all the time.
I think that's huge with diet. When someone starts to lose weight and the diet doesn't seem that hard to them, you ask them, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's it feeling? And they're like, well, it's like a 5 or a 6. Like, you're on the right track, and it will only get easier for them from there. One thing I like about your diet is that there's a wide variety of food on there. And in my opinion, any diet's easy to cheat on because you could always just flat out overeat, which is kind of a form of cheating that people don't ever really talk about, right? It's like kind of a way of cheating on your plan or whatever. But with your plan, there's so much variety of food. There's really not a reason to, want to get some of these different flavors because you have oranges in the as part of the plan. You have rice, you have potatoes, you got red meat, you have fish, you have eggs, you have dairy. I mean, you end up with a lot of great options. So when I was doing your plan, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have a cheat meal or a cheat day.
I know people ask me that all the time. What do you have for a cheat meal? I'm like, I eat steak and eggs and yogurt every day. What do I need to cheat on?
And then when I was doing some of your stuff, occasionally I'd have fruit at the end of the day, which would be after a training session. Yeah. And I'd throw some heavy whipping cream on there. Yeah. It's freaking like that. Felt like I was just eating a big old dessert, Yeah. I was still working. I was still losing weight.
There's something I wanted to hit on here before we get, me, I tend to be long-winded, but there was a couple notes I made here and I wanted to touch on some things. I had a podcast a couple of weeks ago with Greg Nuckols, who we all know from Mass Research Review. He's just been an extraordinary asset.
He's amazing,
yeah. Yeah. All the information
super smart.
Provided. Super smart guy, and also a very accomplished former world record holder, natural powerlifter. And he has that Mass Research Review, and I've been subscribed to that for what seems like damn near 2 years now, and I just read it religiously. He puts out a lot of great information, but he said something that was really awesome in the interview. He said that he's concerned about the fact that the front lines, the personal trainers, about the fact that it's hard for them to make a career out of that business. That they're in and out, which doesn't give them an opportunity to learn very much. And the clients, we know from research, shows that personal trainers are much more effective at getting results from clients than medical practitioners and registered dietitians. It's been studied extensively. And those people on the front lines, I think, are the ones that are most important. And the fact that they're only in and out of the business in such a short period of time, and they look at it as a temporary position, just to make a little money on the side while they're, pursuing some other career, is, I think, a shortcoming of the industry. And, Greg touched on that, and he wanted to, I think, both in terms of the length of time it takes to learn enough information to where you can, train people professionally and effectively. But then, can you make a living at it? Can you buy a home someday? Can you raise a family? Can you put your kids through college as a personal trainer? And so I've been thinking a lot about that. It's something I've been working on for a long time. I told you that the research suggests that the number one way to comply with a diet is meal prep. And so I started a meal prep company. I thought that's going to be something that I think is important. People have asked me many times, why don't you start a supplement company? I'm like, well, I don't prioritize that. To me, that's way down the list of priorities. But whether you prep or we prep, I've said that the bodybuilding figure physique bikini industry has done very, very well with meal prep. And it's the single most important thing that people can do to comply with a diet. And so I started a meal prep company, and I think that's very effective. Secondly, tracking. Whether it's daily weighing or things like that. Me, I've always had that piece of paper that's got all of my list of how much sleep, what I weigh, how many meals, my to-do list. And so I went about, it's been a year and a half ago, I talked to you about the app. And we finally released the app, and then it had 1 million bugs, and it took us 3 more months now to where we finally fixed the bugs. And it cost me 3 times as much as I thought it would, and took twice as long. But that having been said, water under the bridge, we finally have a very effective tracking app.
That's great.
Has been shown to be effective for people. And then third, the personal trainer. And so, I've been doing the vertical vert certs, trying to train coaches so they can use our diet plan and with their clients. So they have kind of and then we've brought in Damon McCune, a registered dietitian who was head of the dietetic department at UNLV. And so now in some states you can't give nutrition advice unless unless you're a registered dietitian, unless you're working for a registered dietitian and implementing their diet plan. So more recently what we did is we partnered with the folks from FitOps. And they're a military organization that works with war veterans. A lot of these guys are suffering from PTSD. The VA is kind of, most of this group is probably on the high risk scale for suicidal. A lot of these guys have been injured, blown up, brain damage, a whole host of other things, and they come back and they're having a hard time transitioning into society. So what FitOps has done is they've put together an organization that brings them in and trains them to become personal trainers. And so we partnered with those guys, and we've got now 300 trainers nationwide that are certified FitOps trainers that we're implementing, that we're providing the vertical diet program to under our registered dietitian guidance so that they can now give nutrition advice. And they partnered with Walmart, so they'll be taking people through and showing them how to grocery shop and that kind of thing. And the last piece of that is, how do they make money? They've got a personal training certificate. They've got a diet that they can give their client, but how do they make money? Over the course of the last few years that I've been traveling, and you and I both know, we meet a lot of gym owners. And I've been in 10 countries and 40 states, and I'm on a plane every weekend, and I've been to, seems like, hundreds of gyms. And I'm always looking at the business model. Mm-hmm. Yours sucks. You're giving away free membership. So I can't use you as an example. But
I need to work on that. I know.
Yeah. You're going to have to start charging people if you want to make money. But I've seen which gym owners are successful, which ones are struggling. And more importantly, the trainers, because gym owners is a small portion of the population out there. There's something like 600,000 or 700,000 trainers nationwide that, by some estimates. And how do they make money? How is it not a temporary job? How is it not a low-paying job? And I ran across a trainer a few years ago, a gym owner a few years ago, that has an excellent program. It's Matt Whittemer in Cincinnati from Beats Personal Training Gym. And he was a former West Side guy. Used to drive up and train with Louis all the time for years and years. But he's also very successful. He was a NFL speed coach, exercise science. He started teaching his trainers how to market themselves effectively and make money in personal training. And he's got 3 guys that were former D1 coaches that had got their exercise science degree and worked for D1 colleges. And I mean, the pay scale there is 24 to 42 a year or something minuscule if you're not volunteering. Maybe the head coach is making money, but everybody else is probably not doing too well. And they went to work for him, and they're all making over 6 figures. This was within a short period of time. And he probably runs over 100 sessions before 10 a.m. in the morning, every morning through his gym with his trainers. I was just talking to one of his new trainers, Scotty, is a young lady who was working for like $10 an hour at a box gym. And she's been with him, I think she's on her 4th month. She did $7,500 last month in personal training.
Damn.
Wow.
And another guy's been there for 2 months, did $6,000 in personal training. And this isn't, one of those, hey, sit on your boat,
make $5,000
make a dream
a month.
circle, what kind of house and car do you want? These are guys who come to work every day. They have a great marketing program. They have a great relationship with their clients. Matt, the owner of the gym, has some clients still that he had from almost 20 years ago. A lot of his clients are long-term people. I find the online business is very fleeting. You get a customer for 30 to 90 days max. And what you find is in the personal training business, even back in, I noticed this back home, there's a training place that my wife's been going to for some time now. And a lot of his clients he's had for 5, 6, 7 plus years. So business is a career, and he's a homeowner, married, got kids. It's a career for him, but he looks at it as such, not just as a money-making opportunity. And I see all these advertisements now. You can't go on Instagram without seeing an advertisement for, somebody trying to sell a training program and tell you that you can, make $100,000 a year and sit on a boat and take vacations. And that's not the way it works. These guys go to work every day. They've got clients at 5:30 in the morning, but they're also making a very good living at it. And they've got, a very successful business in a very short period of time. They're, left their D1 college position that people in exercise science school dream about. I want to work for a big college. And then you find out, well, they don't pay shit. I can't make a living at this. But then he has some other people that just have a certification. They're not college grads. And they're doing just as well because of the marketing, et cetera. So, Anyhow, the point is that we're putting together, he's been working with me for some months now to put together a program to show people how to do what he does, how to get the business that he gets, how to train people, how to set it up so that you can make more money longer term, so the clients can pay less. Just to throw it out there, a few of the key components to it is that he does some very aggressive marketing. He'll like almost every business within 2 miles of his gym, he's visited and shook the hands of the owner and put up lead cards and stuff. It's just simple guerrilla marketing, knock on door kind of stuff. Attended the Better Business Bureau, and he goes to provides free seminars here and there at like businesses, real estate gatherings, and what have you. So it's really fundamental stuff. This isn't rocket science. But the big thing he does is he teaches these trainers how to train more than one person at a time. Almost all of them train at least 3 people at a time. Mm-hmm. But they got to be good at it, because if somebody's sitting around waiting on you, that's the death nail. You're going to lose that client. So he's designed programs that keeps everybody busy and gets them progress, and he interacts with them. They're always communicating with them, checking on them, texting them, how'd you do, how do you feel? So that's a skill that some of his coaches, when they first came, they didn't know they'd be able to do that. They certainly historically hadn't ever done that. Good CrossFit box, they can train multiple people, and they have to in order to make a living at that. You have 20 people in your class, but this is more personal training. So he has definitely trained, multiple people at once. And then another thing is they'll charge, say, $300 a month for unlimited or for 12 sessions or something. So the client's only paying $30 a session. The likelihood you're going to get a $70 session from a client for any long period of time, that's your box gym. Mm-hmm. They're going to charge you $70 for 10 sessions or whatever, $700, and then give the trainer $12 and the gym keeps the rest. You're not going to keep them long term. The less you can charge them within reason, the longer they're going to stay with you. And then you train 3 at a time. So now you're still getting your $75 to $90 an hour, which is what you need to make a career out of the business. And so that's kind of just a few tips that we'll be, and we're going to be training our FitOps coaches on how to implement those kinds of things, how to find business, how to get new clients, how to create all the things that they need to do to run a business, a website, obviously, a way they can, a merchant services set up so they can charge clients on a recurring basis and set them up on these monthly programs. And you can buy in for 2 sessions a week or 3 sessions a week or whatever at a different rate. But that way there's some consistency to it.
I haven't really heard anybody talk about the personal trainer side of things, and I think that's awesome. And it goes back to kind of my something that I've been made aware of more recently is the fact that like any knowledge can come from anywhere. And in the case of personal trainers, the reason why they're effective is because they get to be with that person, communicate with that person, even online coaching. As long as there's good communication, as long as there's a lot of communication, then you're going to be way more effective than a doctor. And it's not because a doctor doesn't know what they're talking about, doesn't know what they're doing. It's because a doctor doesn't have that same amount of time, that same amount of interaction. So a personal trainer, could be complete amateur. They could really not know a ton. They could just know what they know. They could know some general bodybuilding or some powerlifting and know how to execute the lift, know a couple things about nutrition, about how to stay in shape. But that interaction, and knowledge can come. It's just people need to not make the mistake of missing this, is that knowledge can come from anywhere. Yeah. It can come from anyone. And the more interaction that you have with somebody, the more you learn about what's going to help them. And that's all you're trying to do, trying to help them with their health.
And there's a couple keys here. He hires people that have good personalities, that are positive, and they interact well with other people. That's a big thing. If you're in the personal training business, as I see most of these ads come through Instagram, and your goal is to make a whole bunch of money without ever touching a client, that's a bad place to be. It's not the most effective method, as we just discussed with doctors and clinicians. When are they texting you saying how you doing?
That's not their model.
It's not their model.
Yeah.
But also, you mentioned that they're good at something, and again, you don't need a degree. I would hope that trainers would pursue education, ongoing education and information, so they can provide better information for their client. But at the same time, they have to build a relationship. He does ask all of his coaches to compete in something.
Yeah.
So they understand, and they kind of stay on their game, whether it's bodybuilding or powerlifting or CrossFit, or it doesn't matter. He has them all compete in something. It's valuable for them to stay on their game and to help their clients. But, the big thing is, as you mentioned, is just its personality. It's interacting with those clients every single day, and they become like, he's been to weddings and graduations from his clients. That becomes, they're his family, and they look at him that way. Mm-hmm. And we made a lot of phone calls. We made phone calls to his coaches. We made phone calls to some of his clients just for testimonials to hear what's going on. And it's all so positive about the environment that he created. And that's a pretty big thing there is that he looks at building an environment, and it's a wide variety of people that come in. You get younger and older and competitive and non-competitive people all in there together, working together, and the environment's important. So it's just something you see with CrossFit boxes too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Always talking about the family and the environment, and that's something you have to create as a trainer if you want long-term success in that business.
Did you communicate with the name John Martin? Is that the guy through the FitOps? Do you know if that's a guy?
No, I don't recall.
Or was his name Biggs?
Yeah, his name was Biggs.
Yeah, one of my friends, John Martin, he helps organize a lot of the FitOps stuff. So that might have been who you've talked to, but he may have talked to the actual owner. I'm not really sure, but. Yeah. Anyway, are you going out to Alabama to do a seminar?
Arkansas, yeah. We already did one out there. We got 5 more this year.
Yeah.
That's
the same group. Yeah.
It's an extraordinary opportunity because these guys are, boy, I tell you, they've given so much for our country. You hear the stories of what they've been through and what their lives are like now.
Unreal.
And it'll just floor you. And then, part of what FitOps is a community for them as well. And then they can kind of share their stories and build relationships with their clients. And so I think it's the perfect kind of environment that trains them and gives them the support that they need. And it does exactly what Greg's talking about. It provides people a career opportunity to help other people long term. Because, my friend who owns the gym and his friends that his employees that he's hired over the years, which he considers his friends, they're all successful people now. They've been doing this for years. They all own homes. Many of them have kids that are going to school, and I would like to see that, because when I came out of college and I was a personal trainer and I owned a gym, and I could hardly make a living at it. And I see most gym owners are struggling. I remember 10 years ago, I've told this story before, or a little more, when you were renting that little 800 square foot space off the side of a CrossFit box, and you said they were going to raise your rent $400 a month and you were going to have to shut down. And I just think that's tragic, because you have so many people that are passionate about this industry that can't make a living at it. And with a few key marketing skills, because I don't think gym owners and personal trainers are necessarily very experienced in business. And I have a great background in business. I'm trying to get together with other business owners who have helped gyms and trainers be successful, and see if we can. That'd be the next piece of what we're trying to provide out there for our coaches.
I also. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I really do like what you said in terms of I've never heard of a gym owner or something making sure that his trainers compete in something or do something, because when I was working with a coach, or when I'm working with someone, I like seeing that they're doing it. I like seeing that they're doing something along with everything that they have going on. And it's a big deal. Like, clients sometimes do look up to the coaches that they're working with, or the people that they're working with, and seeing whatever they're doing, even if it's not in their sport, is a super motivational thing to continue to keep them going.
And they don't even have to be good at it. Yeah. They don't even have to be better than you. They're there to help. What we found is sometimes the great athletes aren't necessarily the best coaches. And so that's not his goal. It's just to kind of keep them motivated so that they can then motivate their clients, and at least they can understand them. And most of their clients aren't even competitors. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter. I know that clients like to brag about their coach's credentials. But trust me, from as many years as I've been around this, when a client signs up with a coach, they generally don't care if you're an IFBB Pro or if you've got a PhD in exercise phys. They're generally picking the gym that's the closest and most convenient to their home, and that they've got a nice person that cares, that's, trying to help them. And that's kind of what gets them started, because we know that, compliance is the science. And as long as you can make it easy and consistent and comfortable for that individual, that's what they're looking for. And then affordable long term. And that's why you got to train more than one person. And I'm not saying these 3 people train together. It's not like you got, middle-aged mom, soccer mom, and some 18-year-old kid benching together. But the trainer has all 3 of them in the gym at one time. They might have 3 completely different workout plans. Or if 2 of them pair up because they're of like mind and it builds some synergy, that's great too. That's a bonus. But some of these trainers will run 5 or more people through a session, and they're good at it. You watch them, and there's never any downtime. The client's not waiting around. I've stood in his gym when he's had 50 people in there with, running about 8 coaches, and they're all busy all the time. And he keeps them moving, and they might be on multiple different programs. That's a skill you accumulate. You start with 1 person, then you build to 2, and then you go to 3. And by the time you get to 3, you can build a career out of it. Now you're making $70 an hour, 5 days a week. That's a good living.
What can you tell us about the app?
The app, the vertical tracker, I'm big on track and stuff. I just want to make it provides people the opportunity, that which gets measured gets improved, to weigh in every day and track it, to put their meals in every day, their macros, how many hours of sleep, photos of their meals so their coach can see it. The biggest thing about the app is it's set up so that a coach can download the app and set themselves up as a coach. And then their clients can download the app and set themselves up as clients and select that coach as their coach. So now that coach can see all of their clients' daily pictures of their meals, their calories, their weigh-ins, their 10-minute walks, and take a quick glance and see if they're in compliance and if they need a little, a little primer, a little poke. And then if somebody's having a problem with their diet, you can quickly look and see what they ate yesterday.
If somebody's doing really good, you guys send them out like a balloon or something?
Yeah, that's another thing. It'll afford us the opportunity to run queries, just like you say. We can see who, if you set yourself up as your current weight and then your goal weight, whether it's gain or lose, and then a week goes by and you gained a pound when you're meant to lose a pound, then we can put together a query and we can reach out to those people with a personal video and talk to more than one at a time. Say, hey guys, we see that this week didn't go as expected. Here's some tips, and we can send them some information. It just gives you an opportunity to work with a larger number of clients, but still give them all personal attention based on their goals.
Yeah. And are the goals just based on weight, or can I get on there and be like, I just want to get jacked?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you want to increase strength or mass or even just health. I recently did a vertical challenge, 30-day vertical challenge. We had over 100 people enter, and we were flying 3 of the winners out to Las Vegas, all expense paid trip, to attend the next VertCert coaches seminar and do some podcasting with them. And one of the things that we asked them for was a testimonial. I don't care necessarily if weight loss is your goal. Maybe you've got high blood pressure. Maybe you've got horrible sleep. Maybe you've got some other issues that with this intervention, if you realized an improvement in your energy levels or your life or your health, that's important to me as well. If they had digestive issues, and they were able to remedy those with part of the FODMAP or elimination style diet, and those things are just as important to me as weight or body composition.
What do you think of the carnivore diet? It's building up a lot of popularity right now.
Sean Baker's done an extraordinary job with that. He's just putting out so much great information. He started that community. I think it's excellent. I did a video, I think, 3 years ago now at Hofthor's gym up in Iceland. It's got like 4 million views now. Everybody's like, Stan, I'm on your diet. And then I saw your video. And because I go through the whole diet in the videos too, we put out a lot of free information. Yeah. People sometimes think we're over here trying to peddle stuff to them. And we do have an ebook available if you need it. And it's, it's very detailed, but all that information's out there in the ether. If you have the patience to watch a 2-hour video, I walk through the entire thing. But what I said at the very beginning of that video was that if there is a superfood, red meat is it. It's not kale. It's not acai berry. It's not, celery shakes. Something that you can not only survive on but thrive on is red meat. I also refer to it as the ultimate elimination diet. Somebody comes to me with some sort of digestion problem. I'm starting them on ribeyes. And then I might add egg yolks. And then, like any good elimination diet would do, you eliminate and then you reintroduce. And that's kind of why I lead right out of the gate with the FODMAP diet, because that's essentially an elimination diet. Obviously, it's got a lot more foods available. But I've just found that a lot of people have digestion problems. They have, gas and bloating. They have irregular stool. They have, energy level fluctuations. And so I love it for that reason. I think that I'd love to see more research come out. I know that there's heads are bumping between gut biome people, and I'm not saying that to be mean. There's good research to suggest that a diverse diet can improve gut biome diversity. But what does that mean? We don't know yet.
And how long do you have somebody on the as far as the elimination part of the diet? Because if you have me on carnivore diet to figure out what's wrong with my stomach, by the end of day 2, I have terrible diarrhea. So,
well, it might take 30 days. I think it's like Mark last year had people do keto for 30 days, carnivore for 30 days, vertical for 30 days. See how you feel. I think you need 30 days. We saw with Joe Rogan. It took him 2 weeks to get past the diarrhea, but then by week 4, he felt amazing. And you could see the decrease in the size of his stomach. He was getting picked on the internet for having some distension in his belly and some bloating. Heavy, and lost 12 pounds, So I think you got to give things, 30 days. I would say the same thing about any weight training program, too. You got to try and give it at least one cycle. And then if there's not a relief of symptoms, we might have to make... but generally, I don't reintroduce until I see some sort of improvement in symptoms, whatever it may be. If it's autoimmune or something like that, skin conditions, it doesn't always have to be digestion. Even, less... say asthma symptoms and stuff like that. All of those things can be improved with some sort of elimination diet. I hate to say carnivore out of the gate because then people get all squirrely. He's a carnivore zealot, and I'm just saying an elimination diet.
Right.
And if you're going to do an elimination diet, there's no better food to start with as a singular food than red meat.
You don't by any chance go the opposite way ever. Which there's a certain guy named Vegan Gains that thinks that maybe you should.
Oh yeah, no, it wouldn't be for me. I'm too concerned about making sure that the fundamentals are covered first, the micronutrients. I don't want to be a supplementarian. I want to eat my food first. There's very few things I think that need to be supplemented. And it's not to mean that it can't be, as I've often said to people who get all upset because they sell supplements, but they're convenient and they taste good, but it's not whole food and it's not what you lead with.
What's new? I know you always are finding new things, and I know that you're always updating the vertical diet. And even with the vertical diet that people have purchased a while back, my understanding is that you renew that, and there's new information being added to it all the time. So, what's some new stuff you can hit us with? 'Cause I know you got something up your sleeve.
A lot of the questions I'm getting lately, the vertical diet's been updated 3 times. We put just about every question anybody's asked me, and I've mentioned before that over the last 2 years, I probably get 50, 75 DMs, emails, and texts in a day. So it's like 50,000 people I've responded to, and I try and get back to all of them, and or at least give them copy and paste an article or some information because people tend to ask some of the same questions, and so I've got them kind of handy there. One of the things that a lot of people have been asking about lately is 2 things: libido and fertility. I get a lot of folks that probably either ran themselves into the ground, maybe they took too much testosterone or anti-estrogens and ended up getting ED, or as they age, they get into their 50s and they're like, and they've maybe never historically ever tried performance-enhancing drugs or testosterone therapy, and they're like, hey, I got this fatigue and I've got ED, and my concern with that is like we mentioned earlier when I talk about the canary in the coal mine, which is a common term used in that industry with ED, is that these people are talking about a bigger problem, and it's not just sexual dysfunction. It's probably insulin resistance, high insulin, which can be a kind of a precursor to cardiovascular disease when we talk about endothelial damage and all the things we just mentioned, and even Alzheimer's long term, is associated with hyperinsulinemia. So, to me, I think it's important, and then blood pressure problems also impact that. And if you've got high blood pressure, now you're looking at kidney issues. So I get a lot of questions about that, and I think that it's comprehensive. A lot of people will go to an HRT doctor, even friends of mine. I won't mention anybody by name. It's a sensitive topic, but friends of mine will come to me and ask me about it, and their first thought is to go down and get some shot of testosterone. I'm like, well, that doesn't address the source of the problem. And the testosterone might work for a month or 2 or 3, maybe 5 if you're lucky, and then stop working because the hyperinsulinemia or the insulin resistance has just advanced to the stage where that doesn't compensate for it anymore. And that includes things like Viagra and Cialis. That might work initially for a short period of time and then stop working. And because your disease has progressed to the point where now you can't overcome it with those medications. So I try and intervene at the source of the problem. Now we're talking about, back to 10-minute walks, twice as effective as metformin. Just improve your cardiovascular fitness. You'd be amazed what that does to your cholesterol and your blood sugars. And we're talking about, reducing carbohydrates, or at least losing some weight. We talked about losing 7% of your body weight. So those are the kind of interventions that I try and get across to people with simple lifestyle changes that don't require them to starve themselves or go to the gym and do 40 minutes on a treadmill. Trying to find the kinds of things that they can easily incorporate into their life. Something like a CPAP. Drop 20 points off your blood pressure with just a CPAP. I was shocked yesterday when I was at the powerlifting meet, all the big heavy guys there. And you know me, I'm always like, you got a CPAP? Oh, no, man, I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, yeah, well, stop thinking about it and start doing it. You see a guy with, 300 plus pounds, and some of those guys are 400 plus pounds with no CPAP. And so it's not new. I've talked about it before, but it's coming at me from a different angle now. Guys are starting to talk about ED. They're starting to talk about fertility. And we've had some good luck at Hawthorne, as I mentioned, they're pregnant now. That's something that a lot of people are starting to think about as they get older. They've competed a lot in their 20s, and they start to get into their upper 30s or maybe 40s, or like me, when I was 45, finally started having a family. And, the ability to do that it gets more and more difficult, especially for guys who are using performance enhancing drugs or even testosterone therapy. So we intervene with, when I say we, I work with a hormone replacement therapy doctor at Health for Life, Dr. Alfreda. I've been working with for a number of years now. And he's helped some of my friends as well. And we've collaborated on a protocol that helps people with those kinds of problems. So I can't say it's new, but more people are talking about it. I'm seeing it more and more, and we're addressing that in greater numbers.
Are the things that are having the biggest effects the lifestyle changes as far as fertility is concerned? I mean, I know there's probably a lot of HRT stuff that's involved, but is it like primarily those simple lifestyle changes that can really help these people out?
Yep, 100%. And there are different protocols. Like you say, a lot of HRT doctors lead right out of the gate with anti-estrogens. You crash somebody's estrogen, they're going to get ED. And so, we're just trying to intervene and get some blood tests and address those things in a positive fashion. You need some estrogen. I talked about this years ago in terms of drugs that make you weak. I talked about metformin, I talked about statins, and I talked about anti-estrogens. All those things can compromise strength. And I think that that's a good indicator of bigger problems too. If you're not getting stronger and you're just getting fatter, to me, that's a problem. I look at strength primarily, even when I'm dieting women for physique and figure shows. If they start losing an enormous amount of strength, I think I've got a problem. There's something wrong with this diet. So I want to hold on to that as long as possible.
What about just generally being jacked? We talked a lot about the diet, and you've given us a lot of information on that over the years. But when it comes to lifting, you're doing a great job of staying in great shape. You mentioned kind of the heavy squats. Years ago, you were doing kind of the higher rep squats. What do you recommend to people for training when they're just trying to be jacked? I know we got a guy in the room here who's doing a bodybuilding show coming up. Our boy Matt over there. Yeah. What are you suggesting to some of these people? What do the exercises look like? Is there a lot of cardio training? How do you get just in really good shape through lifting and not necessarily just the diet?
It's more bodybuilding stuff. I'm cautious with how much heavy stuff I throw at people who just want to get jacked, because I want to be cautious with the joints and make sure that they can do this consistently. And I think you need a little more volume, a little more frequency. Obviously there's the frequency, volume, and load all kind of go together, and none is probably hugely superior over the other. But I don't think you need to be in the gym terribly long. And a lot of the folks that I deal with now, they're pretty busy folks and they need a bigger return. And so I might only have them in there for 30 minutes and I can get a decent amount of volume out of them, and just hit every body part twice a week, get within a rep or two of failure, work in the 8 to 12 rep range. The load will take care of itself if you're within, the 8 to 12 rep range and within a rep or two of failure. That's whatever load you can handle for that. And then some sort of progression over time. We've said that, if you never take your body somewhere it hasn't been before, there has to be some sort of mechanical loading that you increase over time, or you're just going to stop responding. And that, I don't care how much volume or what your split is. There's no magic to that. There's a good range of volume between 5 to 10 sets per body part per week. The science seems to suggest 10 to 20 sets, 5 to 10 per workout, 10 to 20 sets per body part per week. Most of the research seems to fall in there. There's some stuff that suggests your minimum volume might be 5 reps, and that some people are doing, or 5 sets, and some people are doing 30. There's some argument now as to whether or not it's a dose response to volume. And some people disagree on that. Some studies show one, some studies show the other. But nonetheless, most of us can't do, 60 sets per week. It's just not going to happen. We don't have the time. I'm talking to a large audience here, and not just a bodybuilding competitor that trains 3 hours a day.
Right.
Eats 8 meals and sleeps 10 hours a day. It's a different individual. But for the most part, I want people to find the kind of exercises they enjoy, because otherwise they're not going to go to the gym. They're going to start skipping workouts and stuff. And consistency is so huge and important. You start missing workouts, then you're just going to regress. You're going to build a little bit and lose a little bit, and you'll just never get any better if that's your goal.
Have you found that the people that you help end up getting a lot more motivated? Maybe in the beginning they may ask questions about, like, how do I get motivated? How do I get started? But then because of the lifestyle changes, because of the diet, because of the sleep, because of the attention to detail and fixing the blood work and those kinds of things, they don't really need to ask that question anymore.
I just find it becomes easier for them. When you start to if you're not eating egg whites and chicken, all of a sudden you have, energy to train. When you're not overtraining, all of a sudden you're recovering better. When you sleep a little more, your body composition improves. They start to lose body fat and increase strength. I mean, look at this big boy from Strength Cartel. He went from 360 pounds to 310 pounds in just a few months. Since we started working with him a few months ago. We shot some video of him up there, and we put him on the same thing. He leads with red meat every day. He's salting all of his meals. He's got a diverse, he eats fruit every day. He's taking in yogurt, and the kinds of things that most people would eliminate and immediately lose a ton of strength. He's able to hold on to an enormous amount of strength. And he's been showing videos recently. He's shocked. He's all the way down to 310 pounds. Yeah. And he's benching 500 for reps, and he's still, doing a lot of great stuff down there. He's got a lot more energy. He's active and agile too. So he's really quite an athlete.
On that note, Stan, I want to ask, because there's a lot of listeners, we're talking about getting jacked here. Big SC boy, he's getting more jacked, but he's also maintaining a lot of strength while he's maintaining strength while getting more jacked. Yeah. So what are some concepts that athletes, whether it be a powerlifter or a bodybuilder, can take to know when they're potentially going too far as the body composition is concerned, meaning getting too fat, putting on too much body fat, and their attempt is to gain? What can they be thinking about? I know you mentioned BMI.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as they stop gaining strength, but they're still gaining weight on the scale, we know that there's a problem. And that's when blood tests really help me identify blood sugar problems. And if that's the case, then it's going to be really hard for them to partition nutrients towards muscle. Little things that we do along the way help prevent that. Just like the 10-minute walks after meals really helps with insulin sensitivity, and those individuals tend to perform a lot better, and sleep, and the CPAP for healthy athletes. I know it sounds repetitive, but those things are extraordinarily effective for performance. You start just those two in and of themselves, along with the types of foods that we like to eat. Whole eggs are great, the choline in them for fatty liver disease and for performance. We've seen studies now equating egg white protein to whole egg protein when they equate for the total protein intake. The individuals that are in the separate groups, the whole egg group performs better. They have a huge improvement in strength gains and a measurable improvement in hypertrophy gains. And so it's not just the protein that matters in that instance. It's the fact that there's so many other important micronutrients in there, which is why I don't lead with protein shakes. Because how many micronutrients in a protein shake? That's I don't start there. And again, not to dog, supplements, but it's a supplement. It's not what you lead with.
And right, and how much is it going to really fill you up in comparison to eating some steak and eggs, right?
Yeah, and look, I took every supplement you can imagine over the years, the hot stuff and the Cybergenics and the Gainers Fuel 2500, and I mean everyone you can possibly imagine.
Man, that stuff makes you super gassy. That Champion Nutrition back in the day, the 2500.
I distributed Beverly International supplements for years, and I have high regard for Jim Heflin, who started that company back in the 60s, and the folks that currently own it. It's a really high quality product, but it's a supplement.
And I've said if you're taking creatine and only sleeping 5 hours a night, you're a fucking idiot. Well, I feel the same way about supplements. If you're taking supplements and not getting, the fundamentals in, the basics, then I don't think it's going to do you much good. I was never able to gain or maintain a significant amount of weight or strength on powders. And I tried. I took lots and lots and lots of them. It wasn't effective. They didn't stick to me. They were in and out. It was a good way to augment an inferior meal or have, in the absence of a meal, to have something handy. If you're traveling or working out of your gym bag, that's fine. But my rule is always never do 2 in a row. If you're doing a supplement and then 3 hours later do another supplement, I think you missed an opportunity. Maybe use it around a workout or something specifically. But it's not dinner. It's not breakfast. And you'd never have 2 in a row. It's kind of where I feel. And there are some stuff that work. Creatine, for most people, I eat over 2 pounds of steak a day, so I don't get much response from creatine because steak's loaded with creatine. But it's worth trying. It's very well studied and effective. But beyond that, you drop off pretty quick. There's not a lot of. There's a little research on beta alanine or citrulline malate, but I don't think it moves the needle very far. Yeah. Caffeine probably, for performance, not consistently, but at one shot. That's about it. I'm not seeing a lot beyond that.
Yeah. How would you take somebody that's, I'm just being very, very selfish with this one. So my diet is just a lot of chicken and rice.
Yeah.
I feel better on rice. But I do feel the performance in the gym has gone down because I shredded down as much as I could. And then now I just want to feel healthy. I want to be healthy. I want to look better. But right now, my staple of my diet is just chicken and rice, except for when I'm out here on the expo and I have amazing steak available to me.
Yeah.
What should my protocol be for converting from that to, because I'm hearing you and all I want to do now is eat
steak.
Just nonstop. Yeah.
It's got 3 times as much iron, 6 times as much zinc, 9 times as much B12. It's just a lot more nutrient dense food than chicken is. So I would definitely try and transition to it at least. That doesn't mean every meal. I'm just saying you got to transition to that. I know you've had digestion problems. If I've got an individual that comes, and you just say, if you've got a client that comes to you and they've got a bad knee, do you take them over to the squat rack and start pounding away heavy squats?
If he wants to get better,
his knee won't heal is the point. I'm kind of making an analogy here. Dr. Stuart McGill calls it picking the scab. If you've got a back injury, you don't want to be out there, stretching and bending and twisting the spine and continuing to prevent it from healing. Same thing about the gut. I don't care what diet you're on and how good it is. If you're introducing foods that are triggers for your digestion problems, you're not going to be able to fix the problem. So your biggest hurdle now, like you said, when you're traveling and you got to go grab a sandwich at Subway, that's going to wreck you. People talk about 80-20 rule in terms of food. Well, if I've got an individual with IBS or IBD or Crohn's or any of those things, 80-20 rule doesn't work. Apply the 80-20 rule to sleep 1 night a week. Just take a bender. Just stay out all night. See how you feel for the next 3 days. Do that every week. So that's my point in terms of to really solve digestion problems, you're going to have to be really consistent with not introducing the triggers that keep damaging the gut. As a particular exercise might damage a torn muscle or something. Let it recover and then introduce consistently more nutrient dense foods. Some people can't tolerate egg whites. The avidin in the egg white, they don't digest them well, so you might have to do just yolk. Meat is generally well tolerated by most people. It's what we call a low residue food. If you're going to get a colonoscopy, your doctor wants you to eat low residue foods. It's digested almost completely in the small intestine. So that's the one I would introduce first and foremost, and then try and slowly add food. The white rice is great, for if that's what you need to fuel workload. It's easy to digest, but I don't think that's going to give you, I know that's not going to give you the kind of micronutrients that you need. And part of healing your gut is going to be is making sure you get your magnesium absorbed, your calcium absorbed, your iron absorbed. And I don't know, your B12, all of those things are going to make for a healthy digestive environment.
My concern is having that much fat from steak in conjunction with the carbs, though.
Yeah, you just go with leaner meats. When I worked with Nadia White, she took third in the Miss Olympia. We started her at New York steak, and then 4 weeks later we transitioned her to a top sirloin. 4 weeks later we transitioned her to a sirloin tip or a top round. Each step of the way, we were just eliminating fat, but we were keeping all the micronutrients in, all the iron, the B12, the zinc, selenium, all those things were still in there. She ate fewer whole eggs as we progressed, but we didn't just switch to egg whites. And we went from a whole fat dairy yogurt to a non-fat. So the progression is to minimize calories, but we pulled them out of the fats. And I'm not opposed to fats, I'm saying, but if your goal, I think fats are important. I never go below 0.3 grams per pound for fats. But if your goal is to take in some carbs because your goal is to gain muscle, and I think that carbs is in that specific goal for strength and for muscle, if you're going to be doing more hypertrophy training, I think you're going to want to fuel that. Some people who can't even handle rice will do a carnivore with dextrose around the training. And I think maybe even Mike Mutzel from High Intensity Health just recently talked about how he's been doing that. And I've talked about dextrose for a number of years in terms of how it's not just amylase from the mouth. It increases amylase production from the pancreas too. So you digest it a little better. Okay. Some people can't handle the starches. They just don't digest them as well, even if it's white rice for some folks. And again, dose dependent. So that's one way to manage. I'm a big fan of making sure the workouts are great. That's why I like sodium. That's why I like a little bit of carbohydrates, even if it's timed and if it's dextrose. I'll mix dextrose and fructose because there's some research to suggest, obviously, that you get twice the absorption rate and it minimizes digestive distress to put them together. And just a little bit. I'm not talking about a ton. And powerlifters less than bodybuilders. It just kind of depends on how much you're burning during your training. So.
Ruminant animals are special. Like cows are special.
Yeah.
The chickens aren't and pigs aren't, but cows are because they have the multiple chambers. Yeah. The multiple chambers help provide us with more vitamins because they're able to take that grass. And they're designed perfectly, for us. So chicken's not going to replace that. Pork's not going to there's not really anything you can do to replace it other than to eat a ruminant animal.
Lamb, bison, beef, deer. There's a whole list. You can just Google ruminant and figure out, in Iceland they eat lamb because they can't get bison and beef up there affordably. And so it just kind of depends on what country you're in and where you're at. You can find mince is common in Europe, is the term they use, but that's probably the best way to go. I found when I use, sometimes when I use too much fat, like with bacon, or too much butter, or even like an 80-20 chub, the meats that you get at those big tubes that I don't digest it as well, and that can just be the amount of bile that I produce, and that might be able to you might be able to remedy that over time by graduating. Kind of the same way somebody with lactose intolerance could take in 2 ounces of milk for a few days and then go to 4 ounces for a few days and get their enzyme to increase. Maybe I could get my bile to improve to the point, but I look at fatty content in an individual meal and I can almost determine if it's a really high fat meal like bacon in particular or too much butter, then I'm going to have difficulty, as Joe did with digestion and stool quality.
What's coming up next for you?
All of this stuff is still on the horizon. All the stuff we're working on, these seminars with FitOps and getting this training manual out and trying to get coaches on board and get the app, promoted better. Obviously, building the meal prep company is huge for us. So we're, it's a lot. Yeah, we're probably working on a program with. I definitely am. I met with him last week. My Dr. Alfredo from Health for Life, on the program for all these people that are coming to us with fertility.
Something that can maybe help read your blood work or something like that?
Yeah, that's what he does. Yeah. And we're trying to get a program to implement for folks with fertility problems and erectile dysfunction and stuff. So he and I were just meeting on that last week and see if we can come out with something that's really comprehensive and it addresses psychological, physiological, together. And see if we can make interventions with lifestyle changes as opposed to just all medications.
A book with a flaccid penis on the front, I'm sure would be perfect. I could picture going into the bookstore and buying that one and not being ashamed to put it up on the counter.
Right.
Be like, I'll need a couple of these. I got some buddies that are like this too.
Yeah. Look who's in the house here. We got
all kinds of people over there. I don't know what's going on.
Rob Kearney, World's Strongest Guy, is here. Good to see you, my man. Great performance this weekend, brother.
Look at that mohawk.
You got it with the flaccid penis.
Oh, you're in. Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right.
I got to say, it was hilarious. I saw Rob perform. I think it was the World's Strongest Man, and maybe even prior to that in Australia, watching him. And I was like, how is this dude so strong? You know, all these other guys are like 6'9", 6'5", 400 pounds. And then I see him at the World's Strongest Man with Derek Poundstone. I'm like, ding, 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 ding. You know, it's just one of the most savage strongmen.
800-pound deadlift for 9 reps. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do that.
Yeah, and hit that 9 something. What did he hit? 900, and then
freaking animal
yesterday.
Yeah.
That was savage. It's fun to watch, man. There's just so many freaks out there. I'm glad I'm retired, to be honest with you. I'm like, oh, I'm retired. These guys are amazing. And who was
you got to pull up an old video?
Yeah,
right.
I know. And then yesterday's powerlifting meet was, Larry Wheels just beat Eric Lillybridge's record with the 870 squat, a 645 bench, and something like a 850
and does he even
deadlift.
Does he even care? I mean,
I don't know. It just seems like he just showed up. He was in town. I don't know.
He's like riding a camel one week. He fucking tears his bicep the next, and then the week after that, he's like breaking all-time world records.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Stan still sends me videos of himself, you know, like periodically. And he's like, hey, like, you know, like, let's talk more about this.
Remember that one
Or
time?
I'll ask him a question and he'll be like, how does that help me? Like, this is about me, you know. He wants to try to bring it back to that.
Yeah.
Or, hey, remember this 905 squat?
Yeah, he was bragging yesterday about how he didn't really watch any of your lifts.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know that I was bragging. I was actually
Just telling the truth.
Yeah, I was telling the truth. Remember that Creed and I would come in and we'd squat together and we'd have a big day, and then you'd come over with your triple ply open back whatever thing you were wearing and you'd be like, hey, did you guys see that 800-pound bench? And we were like, no, can you do it again? Well, we missed it.
We didn't even have any mirrors in that gym, but Stan brought in his own. He's like, he's flexing in them.
No, there was one in the bathroom. In between sets, I would go into the bathroom and flex and come back and do the next set.
Dude, there's 2 Mark Bells on the microphone right now. That was crazy.
It's a good time. Well, we've got some great folks in here. You guys,
You really didn't see any of the lifts, huh?
No, I didn't. And if it hadn't been for the ones you guys put into Bigger, Stronger, Faster, I still wouldn't see any.
You were trying your best to avoid it.
Yeah, I don't watch any of those videos. I say, who's that fat guy?
It was great because like you couldn't even get mad at him because like like in between exercises, it wasn't that he wasn't paying attention. He was just paying attention to himself. So you were like, okay, the guy's not going to add a plate or take a weight off. We're like, all right, we'll just keep working around him. All right, Stan, it's your turn.
That's what everybody else was for.
Like, oh, okay, it's my turn. It's my time. All right, cool. This will be fun.
If somebody
Make sure we record it.
If somebody was out squatting me, I'd have helped them with their plates, but they weren't.
Hey,
Isn't that the way it works?
Yeah. The strongest guy needs to get the help, right?
Right.
Anyway, nothing's changed. He's still a prima donna.
My favorite thing was when you set them up with, you're like, hey guys, I made these peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for you. Fed them everything, and then you turn around and eat steak.
Yeah.
Just setting everybody up.
That was nice of me. Yeah.
That's sabotage. That is sabotage.
I bring those to keep people away from me.
Yeah, we're like, oh my God, we were starving. We're sitting there eating, and we're like looking at him. Yeah, like he gave us the cheap stuff. Damn.
Stan's eating steak and eggs.
Yeah. Hey, at least they made us sandwiches, right? Anyway, it actually has been really cool to see your progression in so many different ways and seeing how many people that you're impacting and helping, you know, all jokes aside. I have seen a huge change in you. I've seen a lot of maturing, you know, you having children and you taking care of the responsibilities there. It seems to me that it has driven you further and made you stronger and made you perform better in business and perform better with all aspects of everything that you're doing. And I just think it's great the amount of people that you're impacting and helping because, you know, knowing you beforehand, even though we would kid about it, I know that you have always cared about people, but I've never seen you like this. And I think having children part of it, I think is a massive change, a massive part of it, but also just you gaining the knowledge and then saying, you know what, I really have a job to do here. I have to make sure that I share this out. And I can't tell you how many, I mean, we see it at powerlifting meets you can't go to a powerlifting meet without seeing somebody with some sort of representation of the vertical diet. Like everyone has been impacted by it. So really appreciate
Salt shakers and Monster Mash all the way.
Yeah. You always see the meat and rice and they got their chicken stock and everything. And you just see it everywhere. You impacted everybody. And it's not just in powerlifting. We're seeing it in strongman, seeing it in CrossFit. We're seeing it everywhere. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, I tell you, since having kids, I realized I'm not the most important person in the world anymore. And they could give a shit of what I lifted. My own son, my wife says, your dad's the strongest guy in the world. And she says, no, Thor is. Like, go to your room. Forever. Yeah. So it's probably, I think paying it forward is really enjoyable for me now. I love to see people. The problem is when you work with clients, is that you get emotionally involved. You want them to succeed almost as bad as or more than they do. And when I work with multiple clients that are competing against each other, then it's kind of bittersweet. So you get the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat all at the same time. You're getting, excited and depressed. All in the same day. So it was like yesterday when Hofthor was competing, my stomach was in knots, and Mateus kept pushing him and kept, coming leading and then going back and forth throughout the whole thing. And you just hope that they stay healthy. And as was all the guys that came up from Iceland. I was checking blood pressures left and right. Some of those guys were turning purple in between sets and timing every single other competitor and just hyperventilating. They get so into it, and there's such a great support.
Yeah, Hafthor had none of that. He was breezing through a lot of stuff fairly easy, I noticed.
Yeah, he performed really well, but he had some great competition. A lot of the guys were beat up, though, but Mateus did really, really well, obviously, and Rob had some huge performances yesterday. His deadlift was ridiculous, and his performance on the stones was epic. Just falling on the stone, just throwing his life. If the stone hit his body and his body hit the red mat, then that counted, and he didn't care. So it's just the effort that goes into that is extraordinary. And I just can't imagine. Imagine the next week trying to recover from that stuff. So
where can people find you?
Stan Efferding, StanEfferding.com. Everything's there. Meal prep company's there. My ebooks there. I've got a lot of great information on the rants, obviously, on YouTube at Stan Efferding. That seminar I did in Iceland is not at Stan Efferding. It's somebody else shot that. But if you just Google Iceland and Stan Efferding or Hofthor and Stan Efferding, you'll see that. That's a 2-hour seminar that's free. I have a ton of free content out there. So
can we give people some sort of discount code on this vertical diet meals or something? No,
not a chance.
What, people have to get a job?
You're rich. You can handle it.
People have to get a job or something?
You can pay the rest. Yes.
Want me to I'll buy some for some people?
Yeah.
Send some random out?
Mark's going to do a giveaway. He'll pay me full price, and he'll do a giveaway for you guys.
Andrew, take us on out of here, buddy.
Thank you, Stan. That was freaking amazing. If you guys want to hit me up on Instagram at I am Andrew Z, please make sure you're following the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project, at MB Power Project on TikTok and Twitter. We're on YouTube, Instagram, of course, iTunes. Thank you to everybody that's been rating and reviewing the podcast. We sincerely appreciate that. It's a huge help. Nsima, if people want to get in touch with you, where are you at?
Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. Mark?
At Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. Catch y'all later. Bye.